So we'll make a start, folks, for our final speaker, if you don't mind. I am very happy to introduce you to Helen Purchase, who will be here talking about Aropa, a peer review software that she has developed, and she is from the School of Computing Science here in Glasgow as well. So I'll just hand over to you, Helen.
Thanks very much, Mum.
Your PowerPoint.
Should be there.
Yep.
Okay, how does that look? Let me just get it onto the... Where do I find the slide thing? Oh, is it there one? That's what I'm looking for. That one, there we go, excellent. Thanks very much, Marnie. Thank you very much for welcoming me here this afternoon. Until about 10 minutes ago, I had no idea who I was going to be talking to. I knew it had something to do with stats because I know Marnie's in stats, but that's all. So I now understand that this is actually it's a teaching workshop rather than a research workshop. So that's a good start. But I'm going to talk to you today about a system called Aropa. I'm in the School of Computing Science at the university here, and a particular welcome to people here who are not from the University of Glasgow and who may not have heard about the system. So, designed, developed, maintained, supported by myself and John Heyman. At the front page, as you can see, we offer the service to a large number of universities as well. It's not just the University of Glasgow. We've been offering it to other universities since 2010. So for 12 years now, we've offered the service to other universities. So in essence, for peer review, what happens is students mark each other's work. That's the basic idea of peer review. And of course, it develops a whole load of critical skills because students have to provide evidence for the decisions that they're making, and also allows students to communicate, reflect on process, etc. And there's been some seminal work by Lee, which showed that it's actually the providing of the feedback that has the greatest effect on students' final performance. It's not receiving the feedback, it's actually the process of giving feedback that is most beneficial to students. So Aropa has provided free online support for student peer review since 2009. Worldwide, it's hosted, we have two hostings, one at Glasgow and one at Auckland. And as I say, myself and John Hamer design, develop, maintain and support it. We've recently, Matthew Barr from the School of Computing Science has joined us on the team. One of the things about it is that it's got a very wide subject reach. We have a whole range of different subjects use the system. It was originally designed for computing science, because that's what John and I do, we're computing science academics, but soon realized that it was actually going to be useful for other disciplines as well. So, in summary, it's just jumping around a little bit. My apologies. Go back. Right, okay. So, the stages of your peer review is that the instructor specifies an assignment, and that's kind of typical. That's what we normally do. We specify assignment with a submission deadline, but we also give a review deadline and a rubric. So the instructor needs to give a rubric to guide students in their reviewing, and also how many submissions each student should review. The students then submit their work to Aropa. At the submission deadline, reviewers are automatically allocated. So when the student next logs in, they can see which submissions they need to review. They use the system to review their peers, to read their peer submissions, and then write their reviews based on the rubric that the instructor has specified. After the submission deadline, the students can read the responses from their peers. So in our timeline here, we have a pre-submission phase, which is where you set up the assignment, your submission phase, where the students submit their own work, then a review phase, where students review their peers' work, and then the post-review phase, where the students read the reviews of their work. So there are lots of advantages, as I've mentioned already. The student has to take 4 roles. When you normally set an assignment, your student is just the author. But in this case, your student is an author, a reader, a critic, and is criticised. And it supports numerous graduate attributes, reflection, critical skills, writing, coping with criticism, self-regulation, etc. So while obviously what we would like is that students would learn material in relation to the course's learning outcomes, of course the transferable graduate attribute skills are very important here as well. This one we always find quite useful, is the demystification of the marking process, because once students have to mark themselves, they understand a little bit more about what it means for work to be marked. So if we look at the flexibility in Aropa, so the system has been developed over many years, and we've made lots of changes in relation to user feedback. The allocations, the way in which the assignments are allocated to the peers, there are various ways we can do it. So we've got random allocation, which is just, as it says, random. You can have submissions that are done by group. So students work together in a group and submit one artifact. You can also have the students reviewing in a group. We provide within tag and between tag. So what this means is that your submissions are tagged with a particular letter or a number or a topic, and the allocations are done so that people with the same topic are reviewing their peers. Or you could have it deliberately that they are reviewing work on a different topic to the one that they themselves submitted. So we have both within and between tag. Obviously, you can do it manually if you have special requirements. And there's also an option where students can self-review. So what this means is that they're reviewing their peers' work, but they also get to use that same rubric to review their own work as well in the context of the work that they're reviewing from their peers. There's a facility for review marking. This is often used by instructors where they can look at the reviews that are written and give marks for the review. And in fact, sometimes they get the students to mark the reviews. So not only does the student do the reviewing, they also get to look at other people's reviews and say, well, that was a useful review, that was constructive, or actually that wasn't a particularly useful review, and next time I will make sure that I don't make those same mistakes. And then there's a whole load of administrative things that the instructor can do, like give extensions to students, both for submissions and for reviews. You can load submissions from an external source. You can impersonate students. We find this is a very useful feature so that you can see exactly what a student sees. So when a student says, oh, it's not working for me, you can actually find out exactly why it might not be working or what they have or haven't done right. So just a few KPIs here, just to give an idea of the extent of the system, is in the last 2 years, there's been 716 assignments. On average, we support about 4 assignments a week. We've had a number of unique students. We've got 53,000 students these are unique students who have used the system to write a review and therefore have been exercising critical skills. It's one thing that we do allow is it works for really, really large classes. So this is just the University of Glasgow server. I don't have the data from the University of Auckland server, but I know that these numbers are bigger for the University of Auckland. So the largest number of submissions for one assignment, we've got 874. I know that in Auckland, we had, I think it was 1,032 or something at one stage, because a really, really large class. They can all submit, and then the largest number of reviews written for one assignment is over 2,000. So if you're wanting to do peer review and you've got a large class, in the old days, you used to have to do it by shuffling bits of paper around. Here, it will do all those allocations for you. And we've got 36 institutions use it at the moment. So just look at I've got these data averages because it gives some kind of sense about what a typical assignment looks like. Typically, we've got just under 100 students in the classes, the number of assignments. This seems quite high, 4.7, but we do find that, quite rightly, I think, that an instructor will say, I'm going to use peer review for my class this semester, and they would have 3 or 4 assignments going throughout that semester, small assignments. And what that does, it gets students used to the process of doing peer review. We also get lots of instructors who just will have 1 assignment for their class. So this 4.7 is actually a lot higher than I would have expected, but there are many instructors who say, I'm going to use this throughout the whole class, perhaps once a week in some cases. The number of submissions per assignment, so that's kind of the number of submissions we get. The number of reviews written, that's not as important. This is the one I also thought was quite interesting when you're thinking about student workload. So it's 2.2. Typically, the number of submissions that a student will need to review is 2 or 3. That's the typical number that an instructor would put forward. Sometimes it's 1, but most of the time it's 2 or 3. And the mode for the number of days for the review stage is 7, at 6.5 on average. So typically it's a week. You put in your submission and within a week, it's expected that you would give your reviews. I'm just looking at the University of Glasgow, just looking at some trends in time. So obviously the number of assignments have gone up, and particularly gone up over the pandemic, and the unique number of students. This is the percentage of the student body for each of these years. So for this year, 12% of the student body at the University of Glasgow have used Aropa to write at least 1 review. It was 16, it's gone down a little bit this year. There's kind of a subtlety associated with the pandemic with respect to the use of Aropa, but also this year hasn't finished yet. That only finishes in September. This is September to September data. So I think 12% of the student population, I think that's okay. I'll take that. So I just wanted to talk about some of the different kind of, when I've analysed this data, so I've got loads and loads of data about the class composition and what lecturers tend to do when they're running Aropa assignments. So about 5% of the assignments are author identifiable. So most instructors say it's anonymous, so that the reviewer doesn't know who they're reviewing. Reviewers themselves are always anonymous. In some cases, the authors are identifiable. And the idea being is people tend to think that if it's anonymous, then the feedback's going to be more reliable. Looking at the rubric design, so the rubric allows for both radio button answers, excellent, very good, good, etc., as well as free-form comments. And there's an equal balance between comments and radio buttons in most of the rubrics. So there are very, very few rubrics that just have mark items and very few that just have comments. It tends to be marking, which is the radio buttons, which is marking, giving them a number or at least a quality grade, versus reviewing. So it tends to be equal balance. We have some reviewing but with between tags and some within tags. It's not features that are used very often, but for those people who do use it, it's actually really important. So in some cases, some instructors are concerned about plagiarism and the copying of ideas, and they would tend to use between tags, which means that students are always reviewing their peers who have written on a different topic to their own. Therefore, they're learning from the other peers, but there's none of the other peers' ideas that they could take for their own. With within tags, people tend to use within tags because they want to make sure that the student has the expertise to comment on somebody else's submission in the same area that they've already worked on. So it's a choice that you can make. And it's, a self-review is quite rare, 2.5% of the assignments that I analysed. So just a few case studies. So Elisa in classics, she gives her students 3 topics and they each write an essay on a topic that she uses between tags so that students are always marking peers who have written on a different topic, and they review 2 peers. And then she looks at the review quality. So the quality of the reviews that the students write are marked, and they get marks, summative marks, that count towards their final grade for the quality of the reviews that they write. At the University of Auckland Business School, they have, these are classes that are around about 1,000. This is commercial law in 2nd year. They have 2 or 3 assignments per class, but what they do, they make a special effort, which is why I've got them up here, they spend like a whole lecture going through the process of what it means to review, the nature of the rubric, how to give constructive criticism. So they do a lot of training of their students in advance on how to do this at peer review. Abdul, he has 1 submission. They have a group presentation slides and they've got 1-day turnaround. So what happens is the students get up, they give a presentation, the slides are uploaded into Aropa, and within 1 day, students have to give reviews, and they have to review 5, I think it's 4 or 5 of their peers. But that's a very quick turnaround. Todd Whitaker, 5 stages of team reports. There's a whole lot of draft reports. And what this means is that the students are using the feedback to improve their later submissions. And again, in this case here, it's the students who mark the reviews. And Peter Beer at the University of Auckland, he has, they broke the system once, of course, a class of 1,010, and they all had to submit 16 files, and they had to review 3 peers. So there was actually quite a lot of stuff going on there, which added a bit of memory, more memory, and it worked, but it did break the system. Okay, so here's a couple of case studies in statistics that I found. We've got University of Glasgow, a class of around about 80. The students submit written reports. Now, obviously, I don't know what the students have been asked to do. I can just see on the system what has happened. And the written reports are tagged by name with a between tags allocation. Is it anybody's? Yeah, is it?
I think it's our on-campus MSc project.
And I think the tagging by name is to do with the tutor.
Yes,
I think.
because the tutor sets the project and we don't want students reviewing a project
That's
by
right.
the same tutor.
Yeah. And so that was what was really interesting when I saw this, because I figured that these were tutors, that they weren't topics. We had never intended that between tags feature be used to split the class according to different tutors or different labs, but it does seem that that's how it's being used, and that's great. If it works, fantastic. And what they have to do is they have to put in a statistical analysis plan to put a data file. And in this case, it's tagged by number. And again, I think that number must have to do with some. Is that yours?
Has to do with groups.
Oh, again, it's to do with groups.
Allocate groups or group projects.
And so they're doing the reviewing within the groups.
They're reviewing each other.
And I just found this fascinating when I was looking at this over the weekend, because that's not what I expected those tags to be used for, but if they work, that's fantastic. Even more flexibility. And then we've had some use from the University of Surrey for a few years now, from teaching statistics to vet students. The students are asked to give a short explanation of given topics like confounding and interaction and p-value, a short sort of 200, 300 word explanation, and then those are reviewed by their peers. And the comment that I got from the member of staff is that the students actually would rather that the lecturer mark their short explanations rather than their peers, but it's infeasible with the size of class that he has. So, but you know, I can look at the data at the background, and I can see the reviews, I can see how much interaction there has been. And a student might say that, but I can see how much they're learning. And so it's quite difficult to actually say to them, you know, you might like that, but actually what you're doing is actually of such great benefit to you. So here are some just anecdotal issues that we've collected over the years. Some students forget to submit their documents. They forget to submit their reviews. Sometimes they deliberately don't write their reviews because they couldn't be bothered. Sometimes they don't take the review activity seriously. Sometimes they violate their own anonymity by putting their name at the top of their review. They forget their passwords. There's all these things that students do, which that's how students are. We would all like all our students to be perfect. I'm afraid they're not. So some instructors only include closed questions in the rubric. This used to happen a lot more in the past. Like, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, we used to find some rubrics that were just tick boxes. Doesn't happen so much now, interestingly. Sometimes you can give extensions. You know, if a student has forgotten to submit, if you give a 2-week extension, but the reviews have to be in a week, then it just makes the whole allocation impossible. And then some instructors just don't have a complete class list. And of course, that kind of messes up some of the submission things. So there are all these kind of things which are external to Aropa itself, which we have discovered are things that, that happen in the context. We've discovered that the successes, when we've been speaking to the instructors, that it's more successful if it's an integrated part of the assessment rather than just tacked on. So it's not just, oh, here's your assignment. Oh, and by the way, we'd like you to do some peer reviews. If there is actually some way in which is very clearly integrated into their assessment. And giving incentives like making it mandatory, giving participation marks, giving marks for review quality. I can always see when students are being given some incentive to do their reviews, because I can see how many have done them and the quality of those reviews. And if, you know, if less than half the class have bothered to do them, then my guess is actually there hasn't been any incentive for them to do it. So it works better if there is some incentive of some sort. Just because, as I say, students don't themselves kind of recognise the benefit. Instructors want to make students happy. Instructors are innovative. We get requests, I mean, particularly around about September, I'll be getting 3 or 4 requests a day for new accounts because instructors want to be innovative and they value the flexibility that Aropa gives. Many instructors they say, I want to do peer review and this is the way I want to do it. And Aropa, in most cases, offer the flexibility to do it the way that they want to. Sometimes you have to do a little bit of tweaking or kind of like you've done with your groups. Use a feature in Aropa slightly differently, but most of the time, whatever they want, we can work it out. Some instructors have varying views on whether the right feedback is necessary. I have some of my colleagues in computing science, they wouldn't go near peer review because students have to have the right answer. And what you wouldn't want is a student thinking that they've got the right answer when they haven't. The right feedback. Some instructors have varying views on plagiarism. And this one I thought was these two are quite important as well. And I'm highlighting these because I do get lots of requests and I would set up an account and the member of staff would go and look at the examples I've given and we'll never see them again because actually it's too hard. It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, you try and make it as easy as possible, but you have to think about a very good rubric. You have to think about incentives. You have to make sure that you know how to put your class list and all those things. And so instructors, all of us, we want our job to be easy. And if the system can make it easier for us, then we're going to more likely adopt the system. So at the University of Glasgow, we can load in our class lists from my campus. At other universities, we can't. It has to be cut and pasted. So. Right, so students say that some very useful process I went into reluctantly was actually good. I'm grateful to the reviewers of my assignments. They're like my little tutors. The actual system is very user-friendly. These are positive responses. Instructors, we have had a lot of feedback about how easy it is to use. I think one of the advantages that John and I have is that we're both academics ourselves. So we know the context within which our users are wanting to use the system and what they value. And I think that has helped us a lot in making the system as easy to use as possible, easy to learn, flexible, etc. Right, not so positive responses, perhaps these are the more interesting ones. The students say, marking is the instructor's job, it's not my job. It's not my job to do any marking, that's for the staff to do. And that they need expert feedback. They don't want feedback from anybody else apart from the expert at the front. They think that peer review is unnecessary extra work. The work is the assignment. Why do I have to do more? They don't like critical reviews. They get confused over contradictory feedback. Now, I think contradictory feedback is fascinating because it means that a student has to look at both aspects and say, well, which one of these do I believe? And to go back to their own submission and look at the other submissions and say, I've got this contradiction. How do I work it out? But they're always very glad to see the opportunities other students work and are grateful for the constructive comments. Instructors want things that we can't give them, that John and I can't give them. We can't give them integration with the local VLE. We get requests for Blackboard and Canvas and Brightspace and all these different VLEs around the world that we can't do that integration. And not only because of the difficulties of doing it from a technical point of view, but also because of data protection. We can't integrate with another university's VLE in that way. Instructors want email reminders. They want students to be emailed to say, don't forget your submissions due in half an hour. Again, for data protection purposes, we can't keep that information. And for that reason, we can't do a student password reset. So there are these kind of administrative aspects that make it slightly more complicated for instructors than we would like. So in summary, the advantage of the system is that it's being created by academics who know what they're talking about with respect to what instructors need. It's also been nurtured over time. John and I have been running it since 2009, so it's stable. We've been taking into account a lot of the feedback we've got, and we have that benefit of contextual understanding. that more and more people think they want to use it, and many of them continue using it, but we do get people who just decide it's not for them. And that's okay. Yeah, if it's not for them, it's not for them. It's hard to persuade students to take part if there's no intrinsic incentive. And also the other thing, and this we discovered this quite early on, is that you can use the technology and you think, oh, the technology is great, but actually it's only going to work if you have a good rubric, if you have a good instructions for the assignment to start off with, if you have a reasonable allocation method, if you give the right sort of time level that is necessary. So there's all those other academic decisions which the technology will support, but are important in their own right. So there's two papers you might be interested in, peer review and practice, that was analysing loads of data, years and years and years of data, to talk about how peer review is actually used and what instructors do. And then perspectives on peer review, this was analysing all the comments that we've had from instructors over 8 years and the email correspondence that we've had with them, identifying what they think is important about peer review. So while I take questions, I'm just going to leave up here a few example reviews of what students have written. And now I'm happy to take questions.
Helen. So there is a couple of questions on Slido, but I'll leave this on the screen because I have a question for you first.
Okay, sure.
So more about peer review in general. I just wondered what you, in terms of, or from experience, have found to be the most useful component of peer review for student learning. Do you think it's the part where they read peers' work and leave a review? Or do you think the reviews that they receive is more useful for them?
I think it's when they read their peers' work, and because they're doing two things. They're reading their peers' work and they're having to fill in a rubric and be critical. Yeah. And not all students get the opportunity to be critical, but they're also comparing it with their own work. Even if it's not being done explicitly, they're internally thinking, I wish I'd made that point, or that's not very right, I got it right. And so there's that kind of they kind of get this normalization about, I wouldn't say where they stand in the class, but it gives them some idea of perhaps what a really good assignment looks like, what they've done. And I think that I would think is the most important bit. Obviously, I still want them to write the reviews so the other students get them back, but actually that being critical, I think, is something that students don't get much opportunity to do.
Because I have used Aropa a little bit myself, and I do think sometimes what students write in a review for another student is a reflection of their own work.
Right, because they're comparing it against their own.
And sometimes they'll pick up on things that they think the student has done well because it's not what they did.
Yes.
But no, that's I would say I share that opinion, the kind of internal feedback, but trying to convey that to students that process is very beneficial to them is difficult.
I think, as I've said, the students like to see other people's work. Yeah, they do like to see other people's work, but making them write a review means they're thinking about other people's work and they're doing that kind of internal comparison. Yeah.
So on Slido, I'll take the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Just so we can pick it up.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. This is a really difficult question. I think none of us have the answer, but I'm always a bit worried about extrinsic motivations to get students to engage, and that the quality of engagement might not be as high as if the student was intrinsically motivated. Yeah. I just wonder if you've looked at that, whether the students engage better with enough force, even if fewer students engage.
Yeah, I think the problem. So the thing about peer review is that if everybody was collegiate, if everybody in the class wanted to work together as a group and support each other as a group and felt some kind of commitment to the learning of all the people in the class, I don't think we'd have a problem, because everybody would be wanting to give reviews in order for that kind of global good. But we don't have that. And so what we might get some students who are intrinsically motivated to write their reviews, and the peers benefit from it. But because it's double-sided, there's the person who gives and the person who takes. You have to, if there's not that balance, then you have to try and encourage the people who don't want to give, because the people on the other side are going to lose out. And so I know I agree with you. I don't like having to give the external motivation, but if you don't, then you get some students who put a lot of effort into their reviews but get nothing back. And while I would say, but the most important part of the activity is what you've taken part in, which is the writing of the reviews, they're not going to believe that. They think that there's that imbalance. So what I tend to do is I think I give 2% for a reasonable review. And I just, provided it's of a reasonable length, it's reasonable, and they get their 2%. And that tends to be sufficient motivation for them to write something. Okay. I don't give them anything more than that.
So on Slido, we have a question wondering if we can integrate Aropa into the University of Glasgow Moodle. Is there an integration?
So the integration that we have at Glasgow, because Glasgow is special, is that we have 3 types of integration in Glasgow. I hope I can remember all 3 of them. The first one is you can put a link in your Moodle page, which will take the student directly into Moodle, so they don't have to type in their password again.
Yep. Okay,
that's the first one. The second one is they don't go via Moodle and they go to the page. They can use their GUID to go in. In other universities, you can't. And finally, you can load your class lists in.
Okay.
So those are the 3 things that. So what we can't do, and what I'd love to do, is to be able to take Moodle submissions and load them in, but we can't do that.
Yes. Okay. Where's those questions on here? So many questions. There's that one there. The one before it was, what kind of submissions can Aropa cope with? Everything?
All of them. Audio, video, PDF, PowerPoint, etc. The thing that we do recommend though for video is that actually it's better to give a link to a YouTube video than actually load the whole video up, because what happens then is it's not so much the loading up, because that's okay, is we have to do a backup every day. So we do our backup at 2 a.m. here in Glasgow, but of course 2 a.m. here in Glasgow is sort of 3 p.m. in Canada. And so students have a lot of difficulty loading things up at that time. So if the database gets too big with videos, the backup's going to take longer and the performance is going to diminish. So yes, but typically we get all sorts of things.
And we have another one. Would you elaborate a bit more on reviewing in groups from a practical point of view?
Okay. So we don't get reviewing in groups very often, but we do get it sometimes. So this is where either an individual or a group has submitted a piece of work, and the students are in a group and they're asked to do a joint group, a joint review. So we've had it where in the old days, when we always had in-person labs, the whole activity would happen during the 2-hour lab. The students would submit something within the first hour, and in the second hour, they'd sit around a desk and they'd read the submissions and they'd write their reviews together. And we've had a couple, not many, but we've had a couple of instances like that. On the other hand, it can be done virtually. So what can happen is one student goes in, writes the draft review, another student can go in, make changes, they can discuss it offline and then agree on it before submitting it. So there is that kind of collaborative editor that groups can use if they're doing a review group.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Kate.
So this is just I'm not from Glasgow, so from my perspective, what would be the benefit of Aropa over something that's built in? Use Moodle to Moodle, so like the Moodle assignment workshop?
So I've never used Moodle workshop, so all I can do is go by hearsay. I think there's a lot more flexibility in Aropa. As I say, many lecturers say, I want to try peer review and I want the students to submit this and then do this, and I want, they have their own particular way of wanting to do it. And my understanding is that Moodle workshop doesn't have that kind of flexibility for doing that. And I've heard that from our learning and teaching units, that they use Aropa rather than Moodle workshop for that particular reason. I think just gives a little bit more flexibility. And as I say, I don't know who wrote Moodle, but my guess is it's not full of academics like John and I are. And so as I say, we're more focused to exactly what we think the instructors need. Okay?
From personal experience, I have used both because I was interested. First of all, I didn't know about Aropa when I very first started, so I set up a Moodle peer review. My favourite thing about Aropa, and it's very small, but it's my favourite thing, is that you can imitate a student.
Yeah.
You can't do that in Moodle. So I can't go on and pretend to be a student and see exactly what they see. I had to set up a separate class with Ailey and Craig and add them as students and get them to upload files, and ended up having to take screenshots so that if a student ran into problems, I could see what they see, because I couldn't ever figure out how to see exactly what they were seeing, because as my role as a staff member on it, it always overwrote my role as a student. So I couldn't ever, that was just one of the benefits, but I agree. The other thing is that for me, Moodle has lots and lots of settings which are helpful, but also if you get one of them wrong, it's dangerous. I think Aropa I found more intuitive to use, as you said, it's been built probably from experience of running peer review, whereas Moodle is very useful, but I personally found Aropa a lot more intuitive to use from that perspective as well. Sorry to answer your question.
That's okay, that's fine. That's fine. You know the answer to that question better than I do. So
I did just run a test to see which ones I preferred. So any other questions? Is there more on Slido?
Okay, the one I'm interested, can I get a contact? Yes, just email us and we'll give you accounts. Easy peasy. If you're from the University of Glasgow, send us your GUID, it'll make it easier for us.
And can you export marks as CSV?
Yep, you can export marks. You can export all your reviews in a table as well. So that's the other thing which we found quite useful, is that you can obviously see what students have written in their reviews, but you can also export those reviews in an Excel spreadsheet that says the name of the author, the name of the reviewer, and each of the marks and their review comments, if you want to get kind of an overview or analyse your data in some way. And that we find that quite useful as well.
I've used that for downloading it in Aropa, and it's very easy.
Yeah, okay, good. Good.
Any other questions? No? So we'll thank Helen once again.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
I guess I'll just close. Sorry.
I'll just grab my little bits here, get out of your way.
So thank you all very much for coming along today. We'll put the background so it looks official. Although we're not resuming then. So yeah, as I say, thank you very much for all coming along today. It's been very nice to finally have an event in person. This, as I say, has been 3 years in the making, but it has been worth it. We thought about running it as an online event last year, and I am relieved that we didn't, because it has been a very nice event to run in person. All of the recordings from today's sessions will be uploaded to YouTube, so we'll distribute the link to that channel once we've got those recordings edited, remove double chins and things from the camera from underneath, and we'll send out that information. But just as I said already, just thank you very much to you all. It's been a very enjoyable day. It's the first kind of event that we four have run. So thank you for being kind and supportive, and we'll hopefully see you all again soon.